שאלתי מאת אדוני, אחת שאלתי אותה אבקש, שבתי Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So wonderful to see you all here. You're home, away from home, or you're home, at home, actually. But with us here at Temple Israel, I'm Cantor Batami Moses, my wonderful dear friend and colleague, Rabbi Sharon Mars. And the reason I sang that gorgeous piece to begin Shabbat services is because that passage is from Psalm 27. And Psalm 27 is the psalm that we recite twice a day at the beginning of the period of Elul, which means the month before the High Holy Days. It is the time of personal reflection, or as we say, a cheshbon hanefesh, which is an accounting of our souls, literally an accounting of our soul, that we take an entire month before the month of Tishrei, the High Holy Days, to look at the things we paid for in our lives, right? Look at the things we haven't paid for. But basically, it's to look at our souls and see the things that we could do better, that we should have done better, that we're striving in the new year. And as actually Rabbi and I talked about as we were, studying some Torah this week, we said, we're so much about the present and the future, right? We're kind of taught not to look back. But actually, in the Jewish tradition, during the month of Elul, we are. We are meant to look backwards in order to live our best life now and to have a much better future, which Baruch Hashem, please God, we will all have. So that beautiful passage, as you saw all that, or listened to all that Hebrew, that last passage in English is the ikar, the essence of that psalm. Between all that cheshbon hanefesh, all that accounting of our soul, the one thing that we can ask of God is to be with us. And for me to be with God through all the stuff that didn't go right, and for God to be with me as I make this new year better. And that's the whole purpose of Elul and us reciting that beautiful psalm over and over again. And so, my friends, this is the last Shabbat that before we enter Elul, which I believe is this Thursday, where we begin that accounting. So as we bring in this Shabbat, before we really get ready, we'll bring in more light to the world. As Rabbi Sharon lights the candles, I'd like you to look at your fellow kahal, your congregation, your friends and neighbors, and wish each other a Shabbat Shalom.
I see. Especially if you're not sitting near somebody that you know what I mean. Go say hi, just with your eyes. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
So my friend Aryeh ben David taught me that every time he davens, every time he prays, he doesn't get freaked out by the grandeur of it, because you can't. You can say, oh my God, it's almost Elul, panic. Oh my God, I'm standing in, the path of last year's behind me, and what's in front of me, Gewalt. Don't say Gewalt. He says, this is your moment to say, how you doing, Aryeh? How you doing, Sid? How you doing, Maxine? How you doing, Rabbi Danziger? Glad you're here. Really glad. Just to check in, how am I doing? I haven't thought about that one in a while. But it's time. It's really time. Higia Zman. So we open our Sidurim to page 12 as we get into kind of the groove. The groove is the beautiful music of our band, Bruce and Brad and Cantor Moses, and all of us singing along. But the way that we get into the groove is with Kabbalat Shabbat, a few psalms that just kind of bring us into that Shabbat spirit.
Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Naria, naria, letzor yishenu nekan mavana betoda. Naria, naria, letzor yishenu b'svirot naria lo. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. Lechu neranena, lechu neranena, lechu neranena l'Adonai. And right across the page 13, Yismachu, the last paragraph in Hebrew. Yismachu hashamayim, hashamayim, Yismachu hashamayim, hashamayim, Yismachu hashamayim, v'tagel haaretz, yeram hayam, yeram hayam, yeram hayam ulo, yeram hayam, yeram hayam, yeram hayam ulo.
Do me a favor and let's turn back a little bit, just a few pages backwards, because I'd like us to kind of just really get centered, thinking about all these days that pass that constitute a year. So let's turn to page 9 and read along with me aloud or just in your heads. There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. On Shabbat, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that could never be exhausted. On Shabbat, we stand in wonder before the mystery of creation. There are days when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. On Shabbat, we remember that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. So we embrace Shabbat, day of rest, day of wonder, day of peace. Makes me happy to be a Yid. You know what I'm saying? It's good to be connected to a tradition that takes life so seriously and just knows how to dig in and make it meaningful. And so we turn to page 20 for Lecha Dodi.
Ya la 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 la, Lecha Dodi. Ya la 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 la, Likrat Kala. Ya la 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 la. Shabbat, Pnei Shabbat nekabela, ya la 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 lecha dodi, ya la 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 likrat kala, ya la 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 Pnei Shabbat, Pnei Shabbat nekabela. Shamor וזכור בדיבור אחד ישמיענו אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד לשמו תפארת ולתהילה. יא לה 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 lecha dodi, יא לה 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 לקראת כלה, יא לה 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 פני שבת, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה.
Verse 5.
השיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך כלילה. יא לה 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 lecha dodi, יא לה 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 לקראת הלה, יא לה 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 פני שבת, פני שבת נקבלה.
Standing, we turn to the bottom of page 21.
בואי ושלום התבלה, גם בשמחה ובסולם, תוך אמוני עם סגולה, בואי חלה, בואי חלה, יא לי לי, יא לה 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 לך דודי, יא לי 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 לקראת הלה, יא לה 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 פני שבת, פני שבת
As we are seated, we turn to page 22. The
last
indented
paragraph.
section. You go for it.
Tzadikat amar yifrach, ke'erez bavanon yizgeh, shetulim beveit Adonai, bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu ol yanubun leseva, deshenim vera'ananim yiyu lehagid, ki ashar Adonai zori velo avlatabo.
Chatzi Kaddish, a little pause right before we go into Ma'ariv, the evening service, page 26.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, ועמד יפרח חירותי והמליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולם מעמיה, יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתבר ויתרומם וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שבית הקודשה בריחו לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן בעלמה ויאמרו amen.
So much of our life is spent in here. And I think Baruch Hu asks us to relocate maybe the seat of our consciousness a little bit away from all this that gets clogged up, that gets distracted, that gets preoccupied. Can we take a seat behind our consciousness for a little while? As I wrote in my article this week, which all of you have read, I'm sure, countless times by now, but I said something to the effect of, can we be in the placid passenger seat instead of like a defensive driver all the time in our lives? When we stand for Baruch Hu, we allow ourselves a little hands off. Can we really control it all? I say sei gesund to anybody here who can. I have not been successful myself. So letting go a tiny bit as we stand for Baruch Hu on page 28.
Ya la la ya ya
Taking a seat, everyone. Let's turn to page 30. And not think in terms of months and years, but maybe just this one single day we were gifted today, which begins tonight. Page 30, let's read together. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzvaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening.
Baruch atah Adonai, Hamariv Aravim.
Amen. At the top of page 33, a little meditation before we go into the Shema, or even before that, Ohev Amo Yisrael, God, you gave us Torah so that we might receive the unity of all things in your oneness. At the top of the page, as you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery.
Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael.
Page 34.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Page 36.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha ve'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam B'shivtecha, b'veitecha, u'v'lechtecha, v'derech, u'v'shokbecha, u'v'kumecha, u'kshartam le'ot al yadecha, ve'hayu letotafot bein einecha, u'chatavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'v'yisharecha, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם לאמת.
Page 41 reminds us that we can never get complacent about freedom, about the liberties we take maybe for granted. Tonight we're going to be hearing from a very special guest and a friend of Temple Israel and the Reform movement, the Jewish people, and the entire world, Rabbi Lindsey Danziger of the Religious Action Center. But first, and she is a person you should know who helps ground me in justice causes, but even more just the notion of tzedek, of doing the righteousness that needs to be done for the world. And we as Jews can never be complacent. We have to, remind ourselves, in fact, every time we daven, every time we come together, that there is always going to be a cause that we have to fight for, and Jews are not shy when it comes to standing up for those good causes. So on page 41, as a prelude to Micha Mocha, that song, which helps us rejoice at the fact that we are free, but we also have to be responsible, we read together. Sing the song of men and women, joined in understanding and respect, the song of God's miracles, an earth protected and cherished, a gift for our children and the generations to come, the song of a land once ravished by war, now quiet and content, her soldiers home to leave no more, the song of a world redeemed, the song of peace.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osef ele, malchutecha ra'u vanecha, bukayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, zeli anu ve'amru, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed v'nemar ki fat Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miyad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai gal Yisrael. Turn to page 42 for the singing of Hashkivenu. And this week, there's always so much peace we can pray for, but I just kept looking at those pictures in Maui. And 4 years ago, I spent time in that holy place. I always say Hawaii and Israel are the two most holy lands, and I truly mean it. The energy and the nature and the feeling and the people and my heart, that's all. And I was thinking today, like with Hashkivenu, it's all I want to do, reach out my arms and to give love and support and money, but mostly like strength to, how do you make peace with losing your home and your job and some people's family? And this is not the first tragedy like this, of course, but right now, that's in my kavanah, that those people who are suffering. And as I heard someone say, like, it's apocalyptic. You look at there, because of the beauty, right? The inner and the outer beauty just stripped. So let's just have that kavanah for all those people, lahana, and bring peace and shelter and strength to build again. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim.
Lord.
The earth is in need of a Shabbat, isn't it? This poor earth, which suddenly is full of fire and fury and can't be contained. It's telling us something. It's telling us something. And so Shabbat, Magia, it has to arrive for the people who are suffering in that place and in so many places that are war-torn and so many places that are suffering. But Shabbat is what we land on as a people so that we can remember how important it is to give that to others if we possibly can. Vishamru is our next song, and it is on page
44.
44.
Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם, אותי לעולם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני, עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. וביום השביעי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם.
Sometimes they call a special election just so it will correspond with the Torah portion. Did you know that? Well, that happened this past week. And in Parashat Re'eh, it says, Deuteronomy chapter 11, see, I am setting before you, this is God speaking through Moses, I am setting before you, Re'eh, see it, look at it. I'm setting before you a bracha uklala, a blessing and a curse. The blessing, when you heed the commandments of Adonai your God that I am giving you today, and a curse if you do not heed the commandments of Adonai your God, the eternal, but stray away from what I'm commanding you. And it is repeated several chapters later in Deuteronomy 30. So this must be important. You have a choice. You have a choice. Asher bachar banu. God commanded you, God chose you, right? Chosen people, Bachar. And, the word comes up again here. You have a choice between a blessing and a curse, bracha uklala. And we had, based on the same words, Bachar, we had a bechira, an election, just this past week. Lest we get a little complacent, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, so, voters all, or, we are something that we push from this very bima. Just vote. I don't care how you vote, just vote. But, lest we get complacent, let's remember something. As Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, the late, great Jonathan Sacks said, he said, it may be obvious to us as Jews. It may be obvious that we have certain choices we must make in our lives. Not just in elections, but choices every single day that determine our fate and others. And because we choose, we remain Jews. He says, many in the ancient world believed that we are playthings of the gods, without any control over our destiny. The Greeks believed in blind fate. Following Paul, most Christians came to believe that we are tainted by original sin, incapable of doing good by our own devices. Calvinists believed in predestination. Others from the 18th century onwards believed in the inexorability of history, unconscious drives, blind evolution, genetic determinism, or the inevitable consequences of the struggle for power. But he says the Jewish idea is this: we are equally capable of good and evil, and the choice is ours. Can you imagine how much power we have? Always, just to decide. Why are Jews in a particular position to always push this message? Because we have a terrible history of suffering. We could be the people that say, you know what, God, you've got this, I don't know. You're punishing us for some crazy reason, always the Jews. Why? But we don't. We don't. We have a history that says you make choices and you choose between right and wrong and make the right choices because you have that right in your hands. That's called free will. Don't let any other idea divert your attention from the fact that you have power. You have authority. And so, Jonathan Sacks says, you turn away or you turn towards. You turn backwards and you look at what happened and you fixate on the past, or you look ahead. And he says the following: looking back, I see myself as an object acted on by forces largely beyond my control. Looking forward, I see myself as a subject, a choosing moral agent, deciding which path to take from here to where I eventually want to be. Both are legitimate ways of thinking, he says, but one leads to powerlessness and resentment, looking backwards. The other leads, looking forward, to challenge, courage, strength of will, and self-control. It is no small thing that Ohioans came out to vote in the large numbers that they did and made their voices known on both sides. That's how much we care. And I think it is extraordinarily wonderful that we have in our presence tonight a rabbi who has decided to make her life calling all about making sure that the issues of our day do not get past us. She's constantly holding up a mirror and saying, you gotta choose though. You gotta choose. You gotta decide. Nobody gets to be complacent. You don't get to take that back seat. Only when the rabbi says, stand for the baruch hu. Then you take a back seat. But otherwise, you gotta be a defensive driver in this world, right? You gotta be out there. And so, Rabbi Lindsey Danziger, my friend, for many years already, that I'm so lucky to know, and so many of you know and have worked with, and some of us even went to Washington, D.C. with her, and we've been down to the State House many times together, legislating for all kinds of great ideas. Well, I wish legislating, lobbying for legislation that we care about as a congregation that upholds Jewish values. Rabbi Danziger is going to tell you a little bit more about herself, but she is the lead organizer for RAC Ohio, which you need to know, but also Tennessee, nope. Texas, Florida, small states. She goes for all the small states which have nothing going on. But she is really a tour de force in our community. We're so lucky that she is part of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism, and we're so blessed that your travels took you right to our doorstep tonight. Rabbi Danziger, please bless us with some words of Torah of your own. And thank you for being here. Can I give you a hug real quick? Okay.
Rabbi.
And let me turn this on.
Good evening and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Mars, a dear friend and a fellow warrior for justice, and Cantor Moses for welcoming me into this community, a community that the minute you walk through the doors, you can tell lives your values. I was greeted with a big hug by my friend Izzy, who is a longtime friend of the RAC and advocate for the values of justice and mercy that we stand for, and it's just wonderful to pray with you and welcome Shabbat tonight. I also want to thank Bobby Jacobs and Samantha Bark, who have worked tirelessly with me in recent months on our current campaign, and your social justice committee leaders, people who you all should know, and I'm very grateful for all their hard work as well. So as Rabbi Mars said, I am the lead organizer of RAC Ohio, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Florida. They gave me the easy states, I say. And our state projects are our Reform Movement statewide network of our congregations and communities across each state that join together to uphold our values of justice, mercy, standing for the orphan, the stranger, the widow, those among us who demand our attention. So I have been in this role for about 6 years, and one of the only people, I think, who has been involved with RAC Ohio longer than me is Rabbi Mars. RAC Ohio really started as a dream of just a few rabbis, a handful of rabbis who got together, and it's now a network, a statewide network of 20 congregations mobilizing around 1,000 Reform Jews in every corner of the state. And all those years ago, when Rabbi Mars and some colleagues came together with the idea of RAC Ohio, they did it because they knew that we are called to heal our broken world, to be God's partners. As we were just saying, that freedom is a responsibility. We know what it means to be without freedom. It's our responsibility to recognize freedom and to fight for freedom. And we knew we could be more effective if we did it together statewide. So if Temple Israel in Dayton is working on immigration, and Temple Israel in Akron is working on criminal justice reform, and Temple Israel in Columbus is working on reproductive rights, we're all doing good work, but we're giving away some of our power to move the needle statewide on any given issue. And so that's why RAC Ohio was born. And I'm gonna give a brief update on our current work, on issue 1 on democracy, and our upcoming work on reproductive freedom. But first I want to get an idea of what you all know about the RAC. Raise your hand if you're familiar, you've heard of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. Okay, so a good amount of people. Raise your hand if you feel like you actually understand what that is, what it means, and what it has to do with your congregation. All right, so I'm glad that I get to be here to ground us in who I am and what our sacred partnership is in bringing justice to Ohio and to our country. So I will back up all the way back, I guess towards the beginning. The RAC was founded over 60 years ago when one man, a young man named Kivi Kaplan, a man from Boston, decided to take his honeymoon to Florida. So he went down to Florida with his new bride, Emily, and they decided one night they were gonna go out for dinner to a country club. So their taxi cab pulled up to the front gates of the country club, and right there on the gate was a big sign that read, "No dogs, no Jews allowed." Kivi and Emily hadn't seen that in Boston. They turned to their taxi driver in horror and in shock and said, "What is this?" And their taxi driver, without missing a beat, said, "I'm black. They don't even put us on the sign. They don't even bother." So in that moment, Kivi, the Kaplans, understood that Jewish Americans have a unique charge, a unique mandate to fight for freedom, justice, and equality, and to build an America, a society where everyone is safe and everyone is included. And they also saw that our fight for equality is inextricably linked to other minority communities, other people who are singled out, who are suffering, that we can't be free until everyone else is free with us. So Kivi Kaplan eventually became a successful businessman, an active Reform Jew, a president of the NAACP who was arrested multiple times alongside MLK Jr. And when it came time for him to plan his legacy, what he wanted to leave behind, he purchased a beautiful mansion right on Embassy Row in Washington, D.C., and donated it to us, to you, to the reform movement, with the caveat that this building had to be a hub and center of civil rights and social justice action for all time. So that's the Religious Action Center. The Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism was born. And as legend goes, I can't promise this is true, but the legend is that the leader of the reform movement at that time, Rabbi Maurice Eisendrath, after we got our building, got on the phone, called up his friend Martin Luther King Jr., and in different words, basically said, "Hey Martin, we've got a shop in DC now, let's roll." And roll they did. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were both drafted in the RAC's conference room in Washington, D.C. But I have never forgotten, and I never share that fact without remembering that when our executive director, Rabbi Jonah Pesner, was sharing that proud piece of all our shared Reform Jewish history in recent years at a gathering, Reverend William Barber, who is one of today's civil rights giants, gently interrupted him and said, "Rabbi, the Civil Rights Act may have been drafted in your conference room, but it was really signed in blood in the streets of Selma, in Jackson, in Montgomery." So today, as Reform Jews and as the RAC, we strive to really hold both those sides of the story, both those pieces of our legacy and our heritage. We maintain our historic building in Washington, D.C. We have a staff there who works on federal advocacy, on national campaigns, including a current one on the environment that we were just talking about is so necessary, and on programs such as bringing thousands of teens from across the United States every year to the Hill to lobby their elected officials on issues that they choose and they care about. But we've also shifted. We know now that what changes the world, the ideas, the relationships, the activism that creates real change actually starts right here in this room, in church basements, in synagogues, social halls, and in sanctuaries in cities across the country, just like Columbus, Ohio, not in DC. So now we have 9 RAC state projects across the country, and together our state projects cover, at this point, I think more than 60% of Reform Jewish households in America. And our state projects, like RAC Ohio, are led by our lay people and our clergy on the ground. You heard there's only one of me, and I work with organizers in those states. It's not just me in those 4 states, but it's up to you. It's up to the lay people, it's up to the clergy, it's up to the people who care and feel called and impacted by the issues that they choose. Our local folks choose the issues to work on at any given moment in their own state and lead the campaigns in deep relationship across lines of difference with people of other faiths, of other races, with our coalition partners in those cities, in those states. Which brings us to the current moment and our current campaign and this historic week in Ohio. So since Passover, RAC Ohio has been hard at work, collecting signatures to put reproductive freedom on our ballot. Our coalition, Ohioans United for Reproductive Rights, collected over 700,000 signatures, and us, our Reform congregations, contributed 10,000 of these signatures. When it became clear that we could and would put reproductive freedom before our voters in Ohio, and that we could win, the legislature called for Tuesday's special election, also because of the Torah portion, that was the other reason. And the issue 1 would have raised the threshold to pass ballot measures from a simple majority to 60%, and also made it a lot harder for citizens to put any further and future amendments on the ballot. So what happened? Does anyone know what is the commandment that appears the most times in Torah? Anyone have a guess? You can call it out. Choices, okay, on theme for tonight. Any other guesses? What do you think is told most often to us in the Torah as a commandment? Do unto others as you want them to do to you. It's of that gist. That's a pretty good guess. Okay, I'll stop the suspense. I'll tell you. The commandment that occurs most often in Torah is to love the stranger. And that's kind of weird. We think of like you said, don't do what is hateful to you, don't do unto others. Do unto others as you want them to do to you. Love your neighbor, but the stranger? And it appears a conspicuous number of times, 36 times in Torah. Not once, not twice, but 36 times we are commanded to love the stranger. Those who are different from us, who might look different, who might pray different, who might vote different than us. And we are commanded to love the stranger because we were strangers in the land of Egypt. We're told we know the heart of the stranger. So issue 1 wasn't about partisan politics. It was about the antithesis to loving the stranger. It asked us to vote away our own power and that of our neighbors. It asked us to willingly diminish our own voices for fear of one another. It said, distrust the stranger more than you trust yourself. And we know that when we distrust others, people who are different, our neighbors, people in our city, people of different political parties, everyone suffers. We build a society that's polarized and divided. So when presented with that vision for Ohio, as we heard, Ohioans of all backgrounds, of all political parties, came out and said, heck no, not on our watch. That's not the society we're trying to build here. Ohioans came together to offer a different vision for what our community could look like. One where we respect our neighbors, one where we trust the stranger. Officials predicted about a 15% turnout, but 40% of Ohio voters showed up in August on a Tuesday. We saw a historic surge in women voters, especially Black women, and especially in young people. Democracy won, which inherently means we have to put our trust in our fellow humans, even those who are different than us, even the stranger. So this November, Ohioans will get another chance to make a big choice, a choice at the polls. I'm here in Columbus by chance because I spent the day at a retreat for our coalition that RAC Ohio is a part of, Ohioans United for Reproductive Rights, made up of organizations all across the state of Ohio, organizations that work on civil rights, human rights, civil liberties, and reproductive freedom. And just a few hours ago, while we were together at our coalition, we got the news that a judge ruled against a legal challenge, and now it is officially official that reproductive freedom will be on the ballot this fall. So once again, we are going to have a choice about trusting Ohioans, about respecting each other. This time, it's about trusting our neighbors to make their own family and medical decisions. Trusting religious minorities like Jewish Ohioans to make decisions that are in line with their faith values. And with our reproductive freedom amendment, a lot is on the line. I'll share that whenever I meet with or talk to individuals or groups who are volunteering with us on this campaign, I ask why. Why are you spending your free time doing this? You could be doing anything. And among our volunteers, I've met doctors who see the medical and psychological aftermath of forced birth and never want to go back to the place where we were last year at this time with an abortion ban that's now temporarily frozen by a judicial injunction that can go away at any minute. They vow that there will be no more medical refugees fleeing our state. On part of our RAC Ohio team is a social worker who was on the team at the hospital responsible for getting a 10-year-old girl out of Ohio in order to save her life with reproductive care. I meet young men who weren't sure if and when they wanted to become fathers, but opted instead to get vasectomies rather than risk it. I meet a lot of new empty nesters who fear that their children will never move home to Ohio because they fear their children won't feel medically safe and free. I meet pregnant women who are nervous that their doctors won't be able to save their lives if something goes wrong. And I meet dozens of Jewish clergy who are scared that counseling their congregants according to Jewish teachings, which place the life of a pregnant person before that of a fetus, that this could even land them in jail one day. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a connection to this. And for this reason, reproductive freedom is polling pretty popular in Ohio, and we can win. Polls show that 1/3 of Ohio Republicans and 85% of independent female voters favor reproductive freedom. It's not a partisan issue, it's a values issue. But to win, we are going to need all hands on deck. RAC Ohio and our partners are going to have opportunities to canvas, to text bank, to phone bank, to postcard. So if you want to get interested, if you're interested to get involved, I know that Rabbi Mars, that Bobby Jacobs, and Samantha Bark can be great resources to you here to get you involved with your faith community if you so choose. And as we talked about before, this week's Torah portion starts, I would kind of call it a warning. I put before you blessing and curse, bracha u'klala. For the Israelites, they were choosing between idolatry and God, but we also have a choice between blessings and curses, between idolatry and holiness. So this Shabbat, we can take some time, we can rest, we can celebrate that Ohio chose a blessing, chose to trust our neighbors, to love the stranger. But after Shabbat concludes, it will be time to get back to work, to bring to Ohio more blessings of loving the stranger, of trusting our neighbors, and building an Ohio that we want to gift to future generations and that we can be proud of. So Shabbat Shalom, and thanks for having me.
Thank you. Wow, so good. Awesome. Thank you. I burst into tears when I heard the news that the stranger was not going to be ignored, was not going to be forgotten. Thank you so much, Rabbi Danziger, for your continuous work and for just being an inspiration. Wow, thank you so much. Will you please, friends, will you all please rise as we turn to page 46 for our Amidah. Holding on tight to all of that which Rabbi Danziger said and to every bracha blessing that we have in front of us.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi agita hilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise.
Page 48.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה.
Page 50.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, בכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישוע ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל.
Page 52.
אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
Turning to page 54, we continue in quiet reflection through pages 62, 63. Be seated whenever your prayer is complete.
מודים אנחנו לך שאתה כולם איתך טוב לך שלום רב At the conclusion of our personal prayer, we add a collective prayer for all those people in our lives who need a refuat hanefesh, a refuat haguf, a healing of body and spirit. We turn to page 253 as we sing together Misha Berach. And those people for whom you are praying for healing. Please share them aloud.
Wishing them all much bracha, much blessing. We turn to page 282, everyone, and we rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו עינות, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Page 287.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Please have a seat, everyone, and turn with me to page 294 as we remember people who have passed away recently or at this time in years past, and we remember them tonight. We are thinking of those people who have lost people more recently. If you are a mourner in the period of Shiva, the first 7 days, if you'll please rise so we can recognize your loss. Or if you're joining us during the Shloshim, the first 30 days after having lost someone you love, if you would please stand. If you're here tonight because this is the first year of mourning for you, please do rise so that we can recognize your loss. Standing by you, the spirits of all you love. And tonight, the yard site, the anniversary of our following loved ones' deaths. And as you hear your loved one's name, please rise. Marguerite S. Albert, Lily Cohen, Harris M. Cohen, Sue Ann Finkelman, Minnie Fritz, Estelle Guri, Oscar Groner, Sam Grossman, Harvey Gurvitz, Fania Jaffe, Morris Cruz. We remember Lillian Levinson, Joan Lustig, Meyer Minner, Lawrence Nelson, Esther Omansky, Blanche Oni. We're remembering Peggy Pressler, Eleanor Joseph Reiser, Gussie Rose, Susan Rubin, Fanny Schulte, Saul Schulman, Ann Schwartz, Richard T. Shapiro, We remember Diane Shear, Donald Shear, Rose Schinbach, Albert Shkolnick, Jean Rita Stone, Geraldine Weil, Jacob Javich, and Gail Zampano. Are there any additional names you would like me to recognize? Thank you, Aaron. Thank you. And we invite the rest of you to please stand with them in solemn testimony to that faith which is unbroken. We say on page 294, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Be'olma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha brichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'olma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru. Amen. May the source of peace bring peace to all who mourn, comfort to all who grieve. Zichronam livracha, let their memories continue to lift up and inspire you always. And we say, Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated, friends. As we come to the end of our service, so grateful for all of you being in attendance tonight. You're forgetting that we don't get this weather forever, so I'm just so impressed that you came when it's, it's not snowing. So thank you for deciding to be here to frolic with us rather than outside. And as we lift our glass for Kiddush, you'll join us.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Page 5. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'ratavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uv'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron ma'aseh v'reshit ki hu yom techila למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. L'chaim. Okay, Elliot, it wouldn't be Shabbat without I see you. Say, this is my prayer. This is my blessing. Come on up.
Nice haircut.
Next Shabbat, there might be a lot of other kids because it's our first, Shabbat coming back, and we're having a family oneg, so, everyone's going back to school. So enjoy the challah while you can, while it's just yours, buddy. No.
Yeah, really.
All right.
Don't share with
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Go for it. And we conclude with the singing of Shalom Aleichem, page 323.
Everybody do Izzy a favor and stand up before he makes you.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharei, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avachem leShalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei Amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni leShalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei
Shabbat Shalom. Please take your books with you.
take it home, too.
Introduce yourselves to new people. Get to know each other. Shabbat Shalom.